And here we go, folks. This game is live. In the Ultimate Striker skin, with Beppo, we have Tihatavoda on the blue team and on the left side of the map. On the green team and the right side of the map, in the default Warthog, we have Killer and his Beppo. We're seeing a standard opening from Tihatavoda with the 3 Longhorns. Same thing from Killer. Well, actually, he's gone 2 Levelers and 2 Longhorns, which is a good call on this map where you're not going to immediately come into contact with the enemy team. And it's going to give him a level advantage, and combined with the Warthog should mean that he's got some very strong harass damage. Tihatavoda quickly moving his tanks out, carrying just 1 over to the outpost for now, and it looks like he's going to ferry the rest. And he's putting them up on that ledge there where it is more difficult to harass them. Meanwhile, Killer has his pushing out already, and he's going to do a little bit of harass, killing that first wave of creeps to secure an early level 2 and ensure that Tihatavoda is slowed down in capturing that outpost. He's going to make it out of there no problems, and now that he's on top of his outpost, he's going to be harassment free. However, Tihatavoda has scattered out those levelers, and now it's going to be up to Killer to protect them in a game of cat and mouse harass, with Tihatavoda just sticking around a little bit too long, probably trying to eliminate them, while Killer's having a fairly easy time holding them off as there's just 2 levelers on the outpost. And I don't know how long this is going to go on for, but both players are just wasting each other's time, and hopefully they can get past this nonsense shortly. Oh, that 1 leveler does almost go down, and Tihatavoda still sitting at full health. And still harassing fairly effectively. That Seeker is placed a little bit too close to the base to be any use. And we're just gonna keep seeing these games. Tihatavoda getting low is going to decide to take his leave. But now Killer knows that he's going to be forced to maintain a fighting force at his base to keep it alive, and that puts him at even more of a disadvantage, as Tihatavoda might seize advantage of this and go for an early aggressive push. But he is in fact going to go back for those levelers, and he does wipe them both out, getting himself a nice little experience net in the meanwhile. And now he's going to harass that Seeker, and he is going to bring it down. Maybe paying with his life, very close to dying, but somehow escapes with just a sliver of health, getting very effective harass off there and making Killer pay for that early conservative strategy, as Killer is just massing his units right here, waiting for Tihatavoda's move. Nobody has started to look into middle yet. Killer is now starting to move his forces into middle. However, he is paying with some harassment to his cluster in the bottom. Doesn't actually lose anything, but it's close. Meanwhile, Killer gonna keep moving in as Tihatavoda just relentlessly harasses that Beppo striker. Presumably with a holdout pistol, is giving him a great deal of damage. However, it's going to be hard for him to do much to such a substantial cluster. Killer just going to continue trying to take out that middle outpost. It looks like Tihatavoda is responding, but he's only got 2 strikers on the scene, and he's pretty low himself. He does disable 1 Longhorn, and does hold the outpost at the moment, but that is not going to last for long, as Killer's forces are firing in on it. Tihatavoda does secure his position a little bit further. However, it looks like Tihatavoda is concentrating on this bottom outpost, where he could most likely push out and just take down Killer very quickly. And Killer's units aren't actually close enough to the outpost to fire in on it, all of them, so he needs to rectify that. Tihatavoda now has a fairly substantial number of Longhorns, but no supporting anti-air, so Killer could theoretically use his air-to-ground guns to take things down. And as you can see, Killer doesn't actually have the points in air-to-ground yet, so that will not be a viable strategy for him. The first lockbox is up, and we'll see if anyone takes it out. Here we go, though. It looks like we got our first aggression of the game, with Killer pushing in. The base is disabled and the units leave, so Killer has to mass command them and send them back. Killer's getting very low. And he does go down, which is very bad for him, seeing as he was in such a critical moment of his push. Tihatavoda is going to lose most of his units, but it looks like Killer is going to pay as well. That last tank does not go down, but Tihatavoda just continues to snipe Killer's units. And Tihatavoda might now choose to push out, or just move further units top to continue his aggression there. However, Killer's back in the game, bringing in a Longhorn of his own, and he's going to do some fairly substantial damage to those tanks as Tihatavoda is forced to withdraw. And he's ferrying tanks up once again, hoping to just snipe some of Killer's units, presumably, going very low himself. But it looks like he's going to fly out of there without too much problem, and he does escape with that sliver of his health. Meanwhile, Killer does take down one Longhorn. Tihatavoda does have a substantial cluster here, but he has yet to do anything with it. And Killer's forces are very thin here. If Tihatavoda scouts that out, he could easily push this 20-some Longhorn to easily capture Killer's bottom outpost and sweep in towards his base. I don't think there would be any real resistance if he did that. Tihatavoda does get off some successful harass, dropping 2 of Killer's Longhorn. This is a very bloody map. There's units dying on both sides, but Tihatavoda, thanks to that early game aggression, I believe, is left at somewhat of an advantage as he takes out yet another one of Killer's Longhorns, and Killer's just not responding to this very effectively. He needs to get more healing units to the front, and he needs to be dropping in front himself to focus. Tihatavoda does secure the block box, and he does see that Killer's outpost is relatively undefended, so I think we're going to see a push here very shortly, as that's exactly what Tihatavoda gives us, sending out those almost looks like 18 or 19 Longhorn, and he's going to support it with a Bertha drop as Killer pushes out, but it might not be enough if we're in a base race scenario. Tihatavoda's units are getting awkwardly caught middle, and it looks like they are being sent in defense. And those two forces are going to run into each other, with Tihatavoda supporting his with a Bertha, and is most likely going to have an advantage there, as Killer's slowly picking a few units off. Tihatavoda does go down, and he's not going to be able to command his units anymore, but the damage might be done as they are in position to do quite a bit of harm to Killer, who is now moving in on an undefended Tihatavoda rear outpost. We'll see what he can do with this, as Killer has decided to bypass that cluster entirely instead of contesting the base, and he's just going straight on that Y move, while he does secure this forward outpost, and he's now in a very favorable position. Tihatavoda does have that cluster of units, but it's rather isolated from anything that it can do, and Tihatavoda has to move it into the right position very quickly before Killer just ends this game outright. As we can see, Killer is starting to manufacture more Longhorn here, and Tihatavoda is going to get that cluster in, but it might not be in time. The base drops down to half health. There's defensive Longhorns in the way, but they are going down to the firepower of the Warthog, and it looks like the cluster's finally gotten here. But is it too late? Maybe not. Killer's going down very low, is going to have to fly out of there. And Killer gets one last shift off, but it looks like he's going to narrowly miss victory. However, he does now control the dominant parts of the map, and it looks like Tihatavoda's entire army is back at the base, leaving Killer in a favorable position with several Longhorn ready to roll out and perhaps take this outpost. We will see, folks. Meanwhile, Killer is just securing his control all over the map, bunkering units, taking lockboxes, and Tihatavoda is sending his army, perhaps not in the wisest direction, sending it towards Killer's army when there are several undefended areas on the map, but we'll see how it fares with the firepower of the Longhorn doing a lot of work. Killer does scout that push out in time, and he's going to just send his units perhaps on Y. Never mind, he's holding in. Meanwhile, Tihatavoda also changing his pathing. This is the interesting thing about command mode. where we can see that nobody is really getting a decisive advantage as both players are just dancing their units around the map. Meanwhile, still dancing around, Killer has a single Goliath in his cluster, and Tihatavoda's got several smoking units, so we'll see how this goes. 2 Goliaths now up. Meanwhile, Tihatavoda not building anything. He does have a Tesla tower there. However, he now has nothing defending his base save a lone heavy mine that hasn't even activated yet. So, Killer could theoretically base drop a couple of Longhorn and end this quickly. He does get some effective air to ground, almost bringing down 1 Longhorn. And Tihatavoda still not building anything. His base is low. Killer looking for that lockbox that has not yet spawned. Successfully going to react to Tihatavoda's aggression. That outpost is going to go down to neutral though. But we'll see if Tihatavoda can actually put anything in to capture it, or if Killer will respond in time. It looks like what he is going to have to respond to is a Y move, just a couple of tanks drop. That might be enough to end this game. We'll see, folks. It's looking very dangerous for Tihatavoda. With his base health trickling very low, that Longhorn firing in unopposed as Tihatavoda finally does respond to it. However, we're in a bit of trouble as Killer's just going all in with a Y move. And it looks like he's going to ferry... No, he decides not to. But he's just going to roll his army in. Tihatavoda moving his out to oppose that push, of course. And this outpost is being retaken. That rear drop Tesla tower is not going to last for long, but it does have quite a bit of effect and somehow miraculously survives. Meanwhile, Killer wasting his units when he could just... Oh, and it was a distraction as there are now SAMs on the base. Those are going to get cleaned up very quickly, but now the outpost is dangerously low. And we're going to see what Tihatavoda does to defend against it. Killer's push has been entirely defeated, save a lone Goliath and a couple of supporting units. Meanwhile, a SAM spam is going to successfully retake the bottom outpost that Tihatavoda had neutralized. However, Tihatavoda is getting in and he's able to very quickly wipe that out. No power sword needed as his Blaster Guardians make quick work of it. And we're probably going to see this match concluded by Killer just continuing to drop units. He does secure that lockbox, which is good for him since he's rather low on upkeep right now. Jackal push could be inbound to finish this game off, as Tihatavoda is attempting to re-secure. He's got his unit cluster here that he's not really doing much of anything with, and a lot of those units are low, so he would be wise to heal them up. Meanwhile, it looks like Killer is just shoring up his defenses. It would be smart of him to continue to drop units to harass, and it looks like he's going to send a Y move with that Goliath, with a few units linked up to it to support. And Tihatavoda doesn't seem to have spotted this particular push yet, and with those Jackals rolling in and flowing around that Goliath, we might see the end of days. Killer is likely going to bring this outpost down to neutral. However, that's not the final objective. With those Jackals rolling into the base, it's heavily defended by Teslas. However, on a Y move, that might not be enough. With the health trickling down and down and down, it's going to be a nail biter. A push once again defeated, leaving Tihatavoda with nothing left on his base. At this point, Killer could probably just land, pop his ultimate, and finish it off. But Tihatavoda only has 46 upkeep out of 39 available, so as he loses units, he won't be able to rebuild them. However, he has successfully neutralized this outpost. He's got a lone creep in it, however, it's not able to last, and Killer now has 3 units in there. It looks like Killer just spamming more Jackals, which is perhaps a poor idea given the firepower that a Beppo Striker has, and given the large cluster of Teslas that Killer has around his base. However, there's not a whole lot of defense around this, with that cluster getting ever smaller as unit after unit falls. And Tihatavoda might be able to get a kill off onto Killer here. He's hit his ultimate, and while he's walking very slowly... Oh, and the Seekers take him down. No, that was a T-99 actually. It says it was blue, but I think it was a neutral T99. That is just a mapping bug, and Tihatavoda is taking advantage of this fairly long death timer to completely wipe out this mass of jackals that Killer has been building. Killer once again just spamming some SAMs, probably expecting resistance on the outpost and getting ready to recapture it, as Tihatavoda completely wipes out the defenses and has a creep wave coming in. Does survive Killer. Killer has been doing a very poor job of actually defeating any of Tihatavoda, though he has been doing a fairly good number on his units. However, the upkeep is 50 to 14 at the moment. A bit misleading considering we have 15 Tesla towers on his outpost, and clocking in at, I believe, 2 upkeep each. Those are going to do a bad number if Killer tries to drop anything down. However, it also means that a very large amount of Tihatavoda's limited upkeep is tied up there, as Killer is going to try to snipe this outpost to bring his available upkeep down even lower, or yeah, this push isn't going to do anything. That is going to get instantly destroyed, as Killer says, maybe I should just drop them here, kind of wasting those as he's trying to get his numbers back up. Tihatavoda does claim those lockboxes. He can't do anything with them at the moment, but it's bad for Killer as his upkeep is so low and he really needs to get more. Accidentally, I believe, building levelers, but now has Goliaths coming up. A Goliath is going to be much more resistant to a Tesla tower, and Killer does secure that second lockbox, giving him the opportunity to build more Goliaths. And with his 11 potential upkeep advantage, thanks to holding middle, and the completely undefended bottom outpost here, he could actually really start to swing the upkeep in his favor. As you can see, that Boblin's turkey is sitting at no turkey on the bone, showing how much he's died to how much he's been getting kills in. And Tihatavoda just continuing to mass around his outpost, does bunker some of those tier 4 creeps, or sends them aggressively with a pretty substantial push here that's going to run into those Goliaths without too much effect, as Killer is able to use air to ground to effectively dismantle that push. And Killer is missing the lockbox, and now successfully claiming it, with Tihatavoda continuing to attempt to harass, perhaps getting that one Longhorn, which is actually being blocked by terrain, and his incoming fire was unable to do nothing to it. Tihatavoda now sending up defensive units. He's got those mines, and he's got the Longhorn in place. However, against a sturdy Goliath push, that won't be able to do much work. Killer just trying to scrape together a couple more levels, or perhaps open up an additional push path. His his Warthog gun is going to make very quick work of any units that he chooses to focus it on. And Tihatavoda is going to drop in some of those creeps to successfully, if he can get one more in, neutralize Killer's outpost. Killer needs to react to that immediately, and he doesn't even seem to see what's going on. And Tihatavoda's bringing in, and there goes the last creep. We'll see. With his spin up time, he might not be able to get it neutralized in time. He does decide not to go for it at all for some reason, and he needs to do something because his control of the map is just slipping. Now he holds the disadvantage in upkeep, and he's pushing in. If he's smart, he will use a single tank to defuse those, instead dropping out of range, dropping that ratchet to neutralize it, and that's going to take out one of them temporarily. He's frozen his assets, which might not be the best condition. He just needs to push into that base before it's too late, because there's nothing left. There is nothing, and he's throwing away an easy win if he doesn't just finish that base off right here and right now. As he sends it away, this makes no sense. He is throwing this game, folks. He could just drop a few tanks on the rear, almost losing that Goliath, but does manage to rescue it. And Tihatavoda isn't doing anything over here where he really should be building some units, but he can't on account of the upkeep cap, so he's just going to hold it down. It looks like he has once again just started spamming defensive units. He's got a lone Goliath, no, 2 Goliaths and a Bertha in his own defensive cluster, and Killer's going to be hard pressed to push into this successfully. Meanwhile, his lack of attention to the map has cost him yet another outpost, and he's got nothing left on the map if he cannot secure this. He has the units, but he needs to do something with them, as he's attempting to work around Killer's cluster, and we'll see if he's able to do that successfully. That Bertha going square on, Killer losing units if he's not careful, and the Bertha very shortly going to start firing in, doing some serious damage that Killer is unable to respond to. That Bertha's out in the open. However, Killer is getting pushed in on. That Bertha in support. It is not looking good. However, he pushes out himself. Those mines have been moved, so the path is now open for him. He just needs to Y move. He's losing his grip on the map, and if he doesn't finish this quickly, it could be over. And his units are going down fairly quickly, as he is also taking down Tihatavoda's units fairly quickly. He just needs to finish this off quickly. He does successfully take down the entire tank cluster. Tihatavoda dropping a lone low health Longhorn to defend. That base is going to go down pretty quickly, with just 2 units left, 1 unit left, nothing left, and Killer now has that neutralized. However, due to this right here, he cannot get a neutral on it. He can only get a neutral, and he cannot successfully capture it. And Killer is going to have to work double time to finish this space off before Tihatavoda can pull another hat trick, with yet another Bertha being dropped in an aggressive position, this time just focusing on a couple of those Goliaths. Meanwhile, Killer has a Jackal group here, which isn't going to do a whole lot once again on account of all of those units. He needs to bring that Bertha out of position so that it cannot fire in on his unit successfully. He does get armor overcharged, however, if he doesn't get out of here quickly, that won't mean a whole lot. He needs to just fly away and hope that Tihatavoda is unable to successfully Viking dance him down. He does juke the missile. He does juke those missiles, and though he's still fairly low, he's at least got something on the map. Meanwhile, this post is going to trickle down and eventually be captured. Killer could assist that with a couple Jackals, but his map awareness seems to be lacking at the moment, as he's panicking with the base so low. Those Jackals are going to be wasted as they go straight into a wall of Teslas. And that's not really going to do any... Oh, is it? And there is literally no health left on Tihatavoda's base, as Killer just keeps dashing his units against the Tesla wall. He could land himself and finish it off, I believe, and that's exactly what he does. His Blaster Guardians with a single shot finishing the game off, Tihatavoda being eliminated by Killer.